Imagine waking up without an alarm. No phone buzzing on the nightstand, no traffic sounds filtering through the window, no schedule to check, no emails waiting, and no meetings to prepare for. Instead, you open your eyes to the soft gray light of dawn filtering into a rock shelter. The air is cool and crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and earth. Somewhere nearby, you can hear the low murmur of voices as others in your group begin to stir. A baby cries briefly, then settles. Someone laughs. Outside, birds are calling to each other in the growing light. This is how humans woke up for hundreds of thousands of years. This was morning. It is 40,000 years ago, give or take a few millennia. You are a Homo sapiens living somewhere in what we would now call Europe, Africa, or Asia. Anatomically, you are identical to modern humans. You possess the same brain size, the same body structure, and the same capacity for language, thought, and emotion. But your world, your daily reality, is so alien to ours that it is almost impossible to imagine. So, here is the question that keeps archaeologists and anthropologists endlessly fascinated. What did you actually do all day? See, we have this image burned into our minds from countless movies and documentaries. We envision cavemen, brutish and hairy, constantly running from saber-toothed tigers. We picture them spending every waking moment desperately searching for food, always on the edge of starvation, living nasty, short lives of pure survival. That is the picture, right? We assume prehistoric life was just one long nightmare of hardship and terror, except that view is almost completely wrong. The archaeological evidence tells a radically different story. Early humans were not just surviving, they were truly living. They enjoyed rich social lives, leisure time, art, music, spirituality, and humor. They shared stories around fires. They decorated their bodies. They carved intricate figurines and painted breathtaking images on cave walls. They cared for their elderly and disabled. They buried their dead with ceremony and grave goods. They possessed a culture, a complex and sophisticated culture that we are only beginning to understand. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Before we can talk about cave paintings and ritual burials, we need to understand the basics. What did a typical day actually look like? How did our ancestors spend their time when there were no jobs to commute to, no bills to pay, and no grocery stores to visit? What happened when survival meant something entirely different than it does today? The truth is going to surprise you. Early humans probably worked less than you do. Studies of modern hunter-gatherer societies, which offer our best window into prehistoric lifestyles, show that people typically spent only 4 to 6 hours a day on what we would call subsistence activities. This included gathering food, hunting, preparing meals, and maintaining tools and shelters. That was it. The rest of their time was pure leisure. They spent it socializing, playing, creating art, telling stories, or just hanging out. This flies in the face of everything we have been told about human progress. We imagine our ancestors as desperately poor in time and resources, while we view ourselves as rich and comfortable. But in terms of free time, the exact opposite might be true. A prehistoric human probably had more leisure hours in a single week than most modern people get in an entire month. If you are watching this to fall asleep, that is exactly why I make these videos. Maybe subscribe and let me know, where are you right now, and what time is it? I always check the comments, and it is fascinating. Someone in Tokyo at sunrise, someone in London at lunch, someone in California at midnight, all drifting off to the same stories about our shared human past. The more we study prehistoric life, the more complex and nuanced the picture becomes. Yes, there were real dangers. Injuries were common and often serious. Infant mortality was high. Infections that we would easily treat with antibiotics today could be deadly back then. Life expectancy was lower than it is today, though not nearly as low as you might think. If you survived childhood, you had a decent chance of living into your 50s or 60s. Some individuals even made it much longer. But here is what really matters: within those years, people lived full lives. They laughed, loved, mourned, created, struggled, and celebrated. They were not just biological machines optimized for survival. They were human in every sense that we understand the word. They had the same fundamental needs we do. They needed food and shelter, yes, but also connection, meaning, beauty, and play. So, let us walk through a day together. Not a dramatic day featuring a mammoth hunt or a confrontation with a rival group, though those happened, too. Just a regular day. Let's look at an ordinary day 40,000 years ago, when an early human woke up to the dawn and lived their life in ways that were both utterly foreign and strangely familiar to how we live ours. Because understanding how our ancestors actually spent their time does not just teach us about the past. It raises uncomfortable questions about the present. It makes us reflect on how we live now, what we have gained with civilization, and what we might have lost. It asks us whether progress always means what we think it means. Let us start at the beginning, with that moment when gray light filters into the rock shelter and another prehistoric day begins. You are not waking up to an alarm. There are no alarms. There is no concept of being late, no schedule to keep, and no boss waiting for you. Instead, consciousness returns slowly and naturally. You are pulled back by the gradual lightening of the sky and the stirring of bodies around you. The first thing you notice is the cold. It is not the bone-deep, life-threatening cold of midwinter, but that crisp morning chill that makes you reluctant to leave the warmth of your sleeping spot. You are lying on a bed of dried grasses and animal skins, pressed close to other members of your band. This is not necessarily for intimacy, but for survival. Body heat is a resource far too valuable to waste. The second thing you notice is the smell. Wood smoke. It is always wood smoke, though it is faint now. The fire that burned bright last night has died down to embers. Mixed with that is the scent of unwashed bodies. It is not unpleasant exactly, just human. You smell the rendered animal fat from yesterday's meal. You catch the earthy, mineral smell of the rock shelter itself. If you are near the coast, maybe there is salt air. If you are inland during spring, you smell the green scent of new growth. Someone is already awake. There is always someone awake. Sleep in the Paleolithic era was not like modern sleep. We have evidence, both from studying modern hunter-gatherers and from sleep research, that humans probably practiced what scientists call biphasic or polyphasic sleep. You would sleep for a few hours after dark, then wake up for a period in the middle of the night. This was not insomnia, this was normal. During that wakeful period, people would talk quietly, tend the fire, check on children, maybe make love, or maybe just lie there thinking whatever thoughts people think when the world is silent and dark. This meant that at any given moment during the night, someone was usually awake. Someone was always listening for the sounds that did not belong. They listened for the footfall of a predator, the sharp crack of a branch, or the distant howl that meant danger was moving through the territory. Safety was not something you could take for granted. It was something you maintained hour by hour through constant vigilance and cooperation. The person who is awake right now is feeding the fire. You can hear the soft sounds of their movement. You see the sudden brightening as flames catch on new fuel. Fire management was perhaps the most important skill your people possessed. Let it die completely, and you would have to restart it from scratch. You would either have to carry embers from another group's fire, possibly miles away, or use friction methods that were exhausting and time-consuming. It was much better to keep it going. It was better to make sure someone always took responsibility for feeding it through the night. Who did that job varied. Sometimes it was the elderly, who slept lighter anyway and had already proven their worth to the group in 1,000 other ways. Sometimes it was young adults, particularly those without small children who needed their parents' full attention. Sometimes the duty rotated through an informal understanding that everyone contributed to the survival of the whole. As the fire builds, more people begin to stir. The children wake first. Usually, kids wake up ready to move and ready to play, just like they do now. You hear a small voice, the rustling of bodies, and a mother's soft murmur telling a child to stay close, stay warm, and wait for the sun. But children are terrible at waiting. Within minutes, a few of the older ones are up, stretching and moving toward the fire, their breath visible in the cold air. The adults wake up more slowly. There is absolutely no rush. This is a crucial point to understand. The entire concept of rushing, of hurrying, of being pressed for time, these are purely modern inventions. Your day is governed by light, by hunger, by the weather, and by the seasons. The sun is just beginning to paint the eastern sky in shades of gray and pink. There are hours to go before you need to be doing anything in particular. Right now, the most important task is transitioning from sleep to wakefulness in a way that does not waste the precious calories you will need for whatever the day brings. So, people stretch slowly and methodically, working out the stiffness that comes from sleeping on the ground. They yawn, scratch, and attend to basic bodily functions. If you are in a rock shelter or a cave, there is probably a designated area for waste. It is kept far enough away to avoid contamination, but close enough to remain safe from danger. If you are in a temporary camp, people simply walk a short distance into the surrounding vegetation. Someone, probably one of the more experienced members of the group, steps outside the immediate sleeping area to check the surroundings. They are not paranoid exactly, just careful. What changed during the night? Are there tracks near the camp that were not there yesterday? What is the weather doing? Is that cloud formation in the west promising rain, or is it just passing through? Is the wind shifting, bringing different scents and new information about what is happening in the wider world? This morning assessment is crucial. Paleolithic humans were readers of signs in ways we can barely imagine. They could tell from the behavior of birds whether a predator was nearby. They could read weather patterns days in advance by watching clouds, feeling humidity, and noticing how different plants responded to atmospheric changes. They could identify individual animals by their tracks and tell you exactly how long ago they passed. They knew whether the animal was healthy or injured, alone or part of a herd. All this information gets processed and, importantly, shared. As more people wake and gather around the growing fire, conversation sparks. It is quiet at first, then builds as the collective group consciousness comes online. Dreams might be discussed. The Paleolithic mind probably did not draw hard boundaries between dreaming and waking reality. A vivid dream might be interpreted as a message, a warning, or a visit from ancestors, something well worth talking about and considering. Plans begin to form, but only loosely. The group needs food, but that is always true. The real question is what kind of food they want and where to find it. Someone might have noticed yesterday that certain berry bushes were nearly ripe. Someone else might have seen signs of a large animal moving through a particular valley. A third person might suggest checking the best fishing spots, if you are near water. None of these suggestions are orders. Nobody is in charge in the way we think of modern leadership. Instead, decisions emerge naturally from discussion, from consensus, and from individuals choosing to follow those with the most relevant expertise. But all of that is still ahead. For now, in these early morning moments, the main activity is simply being together. The band, your extended family and your ultimate survival unit, is reassembling after the night's dissolution. Everyone made it through another period of vulnerability. Everyone is here, accounted for, and ready for another day. There is safety in numbers, yes, but there is also something much deeper at play. It is something that explains why humans are so fundamentally social. We literally evolved to need each other. Those who felt content in groups, who drew comfort from proximity to their kin, and who genuinely enjoyed cooperation were the ones who survived the ancient evolutionary bottlenecks. Their descendants, meaning us, carry the very genes that make isolation feel wrong and community feel absolutely necessary. Children are playing now, their energy infectious. They are not playing anything structured. There are no rules to follow. They are just running, chasing, and wrestling. This is the kind of physical play that builds lifelong strength and coordination. The adults watch with half an eye, letting the kids be kids, but they remain ready to intervene if the play gets too rough or if someone wanders too far. Meanwhile, practical concerns are being addressed. Someone is checking the tools from yesterday. Is that spear point still secure in its shaft? Did that carrying basket develop any weak spots that need repairing? Is there enough cordage for today's needs, or does someone need to spend time making more? These are not chores in the modern sense of the word. They are not unpleasant tasks you desperately try to finish before getting to what you actually want to do. They are just part of life, as natural as breathing. And all of it, is happening without any sense of time pressure. The sun is higher now, and the morning chill is beginning to fade. You have been awake for maybe an hour, though you have no way to measure that and absolutely no reason to care. Your stomach is starting to remind you that it is empty. Other people are probably feeling the exact same thing. Soon, attention will turn to food, but not just yet. For now, you are warm. You are safe. You are surrounded by people who know you deeply and care about your survival, simply because your survival increases their own chances. This is what it means to wake up in the Paleolithic. There is no sudden jarring into consciousness. There is no stressful racing to get ready. There is just the slow, communal transition from sleep to activity, guided gently by light, by bodies, and by the ancient rhythms that governed human life for hundreds of thousands of years. It is a pattern so fundamental that we still carry the biological echoes of it today. That sudden desire to hit the snooze button, to wake up slowly, and to ease into the day rather than attacking it is not laziness. That is your Paleolithic brain remembering how mornings used to work, back when we had all the time in the world and the only schedule that mattered was the movement of the sun across the sky. Let us talk about breakfast. Except, your ancestors 40,000 years ago did not actually have breakfast. At least, not in the way you think about it. They did not wake up at 7 a.m., stumble into the kitchen, and pour themselves a bowl of cereal. They did not have designated meal times at all, not really. They ate when food was available, when hunger demanded it, and when the opportunity presented itself. While this might sound chaotic, it was not. It was perfectly adapted to their daily reality. Picture yourself waking up in that rock shelter as the first light filters through the entrance. Your stomach growls. You are hungry, so you eat. It is as simple as that. What you are eating depends entirely on what happens to be available. Maybe there is leftover meat from 2 days ago, when the hunters brought down a red deer. It has been hanging in the cool back of the shelter, away from direct sunlight, and carefully wrapped in the deer's own hide. The cold autumn air has kept it from spoiling, though it is starting to develop that slightly gamey smell. That smell means you should probably finish it today. You pull off a strip and chew it slowly. It is tough and requires real jaw work, but it provides the exact protein and fat your body needs after a long night of sleep. Your teeth are strong, and your jaw muscles are remarkably powerful. Dental analysis of Paleolithic skulls shows distinct wear patterns. This is clear evidence of a lifetime spent processing tough, unrefined foods. But here is what is truly fascinating. Those same ancient teeth show something else. Scientists find microscopic plant residues, starch grains from roots and tubers, and phytoliths from seeds and nuts. Your ancestors were not just eating meat. They were eating absolutely everything. Beside the meat sits a wooden bowl. In reality, it is just a section of bark folded and sealed securely with pine resin. It is filled with hazelnuts gathered 3 days ago. You crack a few between your back molars. This technique has been passed down carefully through generations. Children watch adults do this from infancy, learning the exact angle and pressure needed to crack the shell without crushing the precious meat inside. Next to the nuts, there is a leather pouch containing dried berries. These are blackberries gathered during the late summer abundance and dried in the sun. They are wrinkled now, serving as pockets of concentrated sweetness, and you eat a handful. The sugar hits your system immediately, providing a welcome burst of quick energy. But the real treasure is the basket of roots sitting near the fire. Someone, probably one of the older women with decades of deep plant knowledge, dug these up yesterday from the riverbank. They are cattail roots, which are starchy and highly nutritious, but basically inedible when raw. So, they have been placed near the fire. They are not directly in the flames, just close enough that the gentle heat slowly breaks down the tough fibers and converts complex starches into digestible sugars. This is cooking, but not like you know it. There are no recipes, no precise temperatures, and no timers. There is only the knowledge accumulated over thousands of generations about exactly what heat does to different foods. The roots have been sitting there all night, slowly roasting in the residual heat from a fire that never quite goes out. By morning, they are soft enough to eat and sweet enough to enjoy. You pull one out, being careful not to burn your fingers. It is hot but manageable. You peel away the rough outer layer and bite into the warm flesh. It might not be considered delicious by modern standards, but it is deeply filling, and more importantly, it is safe. Raw, these roots contain toxins that would give you a nasty stomach ache. Cooked, they become perfectly edible. This transformation, turning inedible plants into rich food through the power of fire, might be one of the most important technological breakthroughs in human history. It effectively doubled or tripled the number of plant species your ancestors could safely eat. Tubers that were toxic raw became staple foods when roasted. Seeds that would normally pass through the digestive system unchanged became valuable nutrition when ground and heated. The evidence for this incredible dietary diversity comes from multiple scientific sources. Coprolites, which are fossilized feces, have been found at archaeological sites all across Europe and Africa. When scientists analyze them under microscopes, they find an astonishing variety of plant remains. They discover seeds from dozens of different species, pollen from flowers, and microscopic fragments of leaves, roots, and bark. Some coprolites even show evidence of insects, such as grasshoppers, beetle larvae, and termites. These might seem unappetizing to modern Western palates, but they are actually excellent sources of clean protein and healthy fat. Many contemporary hunter-gatherer societies consider insects to be true delicacies, and there is no reason to think your ancestors felt any differently. Dental calculus, the hardened plaque that builds up on teeth over time, tells a very similar story. When archaeologists scrape it off Paleolithic skulls and examine it under high-powered microscopes, they find plant starches from across the entire environmental spectrum. They find wild grains, root vegetables, nuts, berries, and even tough plant fibers that were probably chewed to extract moisture or to soften them for other practical uses. What emerges from all this evidence is a picture of incredible dietary flexibility. Your ancestors were not specialized hypercarnivores. They were ultimate opportunists, capable of exploiting virtually any viable food source in their environment. Coastal groups ate fish, shellfish, seaweed, seabirds, and sea mammals, all supplemented with whatever plants grew near the shore. Inland forest dwellers ate deer, wild boar, nuts, berries, roots, and mushrooms. Groups living near rivers ate fish, waterfowl, aquatic plants, and the land animals that came down to drink. This flexibility was absolutely crucial for human survival. Environments change, seasons shift, and animal migrations follow highly unpredictable patterns. A group that could only eat one or two types of food would quickly starve when those resources became scarce. But a group that could eat 50 different things would always find a way to make it through. As you are eating your morning meal, others are doing the exact same thing. The young mother is sharing nuts with her toddler, patiently showing him how to crack them and how to pick out the meat without getting shell fragments. He is not very good at it just yet. His small hands still lack the necessary strength and coordination, but he is learning. In a few years, he will be teaching his own younger siblings the exact same skill. The old woman is preparing something a bit more complex. She has taken some of the leftover meat and is pounding it rhythmically between two stones, mixing it with rendered fat and dried berries. She is making pemmican, though she does not call it by that name. To her, it is just food that lasts, concentrated nutrition that can be carried on long journeys or stored safely for lean times. This is technical and highly precise knowledge. The ratio of meat to fat to berries has to be exactly right, or the entire mixture spoils. The pounding has to be thorough, or the ingredients will not bind together properly. She learned this from her mother, who learned it from hers. It is a chain of human knowledge transmission stretching back thousands of generations. Nobody is eating alone. In fact, that almost never happens. Food is deeply social. It is shared and distributed according to complex rules that everyone understands implicitly. The hunter who made the kill yesterday is not eating any more than anyone else. In fact, he might actually be eating less, because that is exactly how the system works. You kill an animal, you share it completely with the group, and when someone else makes a kill down the line, they will share it with you. This is insurance, risk pooling, and the essential social glue that keeps the group together. Children run back and forth between the families, stealing bites from different adults, getting swatted away playfully, or having food pressed into their hands. Nobody is stingy with the children. There is always enough to go around. Or, if there isn't, the adults will willingly eat less to make sure the young ones get fed first. The meal is not formal or ceremonial. People eat while standing up, sitting down, walking around, checking their tools, talking, and laughing. But it serves crucial social functions anyway. Everyone is together, reinforcing their bonds, sharing vital information, and making plans for the day ahead. Who is going to gather plants today? Who is going hunting? Who is staying back at the camp to work on that deer hide? These decisions happen organically, emerging from consensus rather than a top-down command. Someone mentions that the hazelnut trees by the northern grove should be producing incredibly well right now. Several women and older children instantly volunteer to go check it out. Someone else notes that there were fresh deer tracks near the river yesterday. The hunters exchange quick glances, nod, and start mentally preparing for a possible pursuit. Food preparation continues naturally throughout this conversation. Hands are always busy. Someone is grinding seeds between flat stones. Someone else is sorting through dried herbs, carefully discarding any that show signs of mold. A teenager is learning how to use a sharp flint flake to slice thin strips of meat, preparing them for the drying rack. These skills are crucial, and they are learned entirely through observation and hands-on practice. There are no written recipes and no formal classrooms. Children simply watch the adults, try to imitate them, get corrected, and try again. By the time they are adults themselves, they possess an encyclopedic knowledge about food. They know exactly which plants are edible and when, how to identify them in different seasons, where they grow, how to process them, and how to store them long term. This internal knowledge base is staggering. Ethnographic studies of modern hunter-gatherers show that individuals typically know detailed information about 200 to 300 distinct plant species. They know which parts are edible, which require extensive processing, which are medicinal, which are toxic, and which are useful for other purposes like making cordage or poison for arrow tips. Your ancestors almost certainly possessed the exact same depth of knowledge. They absolutely had to. Their survival depended entirely on it. Eat the wrong mushroom, and you are dead. Fail to properly prepare certain roots, and you will spend the next 3 days with debilitating, painful cramps. This is not casual knowledge. This is life and death information, carefully preserved and transmitted across countless generations. As the morning meal winds down, the fire is fed a few more dry sticks. The embers never go out entirely if someone is paying attention. Fire is far too valuable and much too difficult to make from scratch. It is always better to keep it alive by feeding it regularly and protecting it from the rain and wind. Someone is always responsible for tending the fire, with the duty usually rotating through different individuals. The morning meal was not elaborate, but it was entirely adequate. Everyone has eaten something. Bellies are reasonably full. Energy levels are now sufficient for whatever the day will bring. And that is really all that matters. Your ancestors were not culinary gourmets, but they understood nutrition in a deep, intuitive way. They knew that variety mattered, that different foods provided different health benefits, and that balance across days and weeks was far more important than perfection at every single meal. They were eating to live, but they were also living to eat. Food was a source of true pleasure, even when it was simple. They enjoyed the satisfaction of cracking a nut perfectly. They loved the sweetness of ripe berries. They savored the rich fattiness of bone marrow roasted over an open fire. These were not just calories to them. They were full experiences. They were shared moments and deep connections to the landscape and to each other. And now, with morning fully arrived and stomach satisfied, it is finally time to get to work. The day's real activities are about to begin. Here is what nobody tells you about prehistoric life. The hunt always gets all the glory. We love the dramatic confrontations with mammoths, the coordinated takedowns of massive deer, and the dangerous face-offs with apex predators. That is what easily captures our modern imagination. That is what ends up in museums and big-budget documentaries. But here is the truth that would have been obvious to anyone actually living 40,000 years ago. Hunting was the exception. Gathering was the rule. On any given day, somewhere between 60 and 80% of your daily calories came from plants, roots, tubers, nuts, seeds, berries, leaves, and flowers. The exact percentage varied by season and location. Groups living near coastlines might have gotten more protein from fresh shellfish. Communities in northern regions might have relied much more heavily on meat during long winters. But for most human populations, most of the time, plants were the very things that kept you alive. This was not because our ancestors were particularly fond of vegetables. It was simple evolutionary math. A successful hunt might provide enough meat to feed your entire band for several days, but hunts failed far more often than they succeeded. Animals are fast, unpredictable, and highly dangerous. They require hours of intense tracking, careful coordination, and a considerable amount of pure luck. Plants, meanwhile, stay put. They are exactly where you left them last season, growing in predictable patterns that anyone with enough knowledge could easily learn to read. So, while the hunters were out there hoping for glory, the majority of your band was engaged in the real, quiet work of survival. They walked the landscape with practiced eyes, reading signs invisible to the untrained, and collecting the foods that would actually end up in tonight's meal. Now, here is where we need to be very careful about our assumptions. For decades, anthropologists told a neat, simple story about prehistoric gender roles. Men hunted, and women gathered. It was presented as natural, inevitable, and maybe even biologically determined. But the archaeological evidence tells a much more complicated story. Yes, in many prehistoric societies, women and older children did do most of the gathering while men specialized in hunting. But that was not true for all societies, and not even most necessarily. Archaeological evidence from various sites shows women buried with formidable hunting weapons. Isotope analysis of ancient bones reveals that some women ate diets just as meat-heavy as any male hunter. Some groups practiced large communal hunting where absolutely everyone participated. Others had specialized gatherers of both sexes who spent their entire lives perfecting their knowledge of plants. The truth is probably this: prehistoric societies were deeply pragmatic. They organized labor in ways that made the most sense for their specific circumstances. In some groups, women who were pregnant or nursing might have focused more on gathering because it was highly compatible with carrying infants. In others, post-reproductive women might have become the most valuable hunters in the community precisely because they could hunt without the constraints of childbearing. The key point is this: do not imagine gathering as something less important or less prestigious than hunting. It was highly specialist knowledge. It required years of rigorous training, and it kept everyone alive. So, picture yourself on that gathering expedition. It is mid-morning now. The sun has been up for a few hours, completely burning off the morning mist. You are heading out into the wilderness with 3 other people. You are with your mother's sister, who knows the plant locations better than anyone else in your band. You are accompanied by a younger cousin, maybe 11 years old, who is actively learning the roots and the ancient knowledge. And your own child, just 3 years old, is strapped securely to your back in a sling made from carefully softened deer hide. You are not just wandering around randomly. You are following a highly detailed mental map that has been built up over years of close observation. The oak grove, 3 miles to the north, should have acorns perfectly ready for collection right now. The patch of wild onions near the creek will be past their prime, but there is a stand of cattails just beyond it where you can dig up the starchy roots. If you are lucky, you might find a hidden beehive filled with honey. If you are really lucky, you might find birds' eggs. The walk itself is no casual stroll. You are covering somewhere between 5 and 10 miles today. Most of it is over rugged terrain that would easily challenge modern hikers. You are navigating rocky hillsides, thick underbrush, streams to ford, and steep slopes to climb. You are doing all of this while carrying a growing child, plus the vital tools of your trade. You carry a digging stick, fire-hardened and worn perfectly smooth from use. You have several baskets woven from tough plant fibers, nested neatly inside each other. There is a leather bag for small, unexpected finds. Maybe you even have a sharp stone knife tucked into a belt made from twisted plant fibers. But here is what makes gathering so profoundly different from hunting. It is not about adrenaline or high drama. It is entirely about deep attention. You are reading the landscape like an open book, noticing tiny details that would be completely invisible to outsiders. You spot the slight discoloration of the soil that indicates wild tubers are growing below. You recognize the pattern of animal tracks that suggests a fruiting tree is nearby. You note the specific angle of sunlight that tells you which side of the hill will have the ripest berries. Your aunt suddenly stops at what looks like an entirely unremarkable patch of ground. But she sees something you are still actively learning to recognize. She spots a particular type of grass that always grows right next to edible roots. She drives her digging stick deep into the earth, probing carefully. 3 inches down, she strikes something solid. She works the stick around it, gently loosening the packed soil. Then, she reaches in with her bare hands and pulls up a tuber the size of your fist. It is pale, knobby, and completely unappetizing to look at. But you know from experience that when it is roasted in the coals of tonight's fire, it will be sweet and deeply filling. She hands it to you. You place it carefully inside your basket. She digs again. She pulls up another tuber, and then another. This spot is incredibly rich. In just 10 minutes, you have collected enough tubers to feed everyone tonight. You might even have plenty of leftovers for tomorrow. But you are not done yet. Your aunt knows these plants by heart. More importantly, she knows their stories. The stories are exactly how you remember the knowledge. She tells your young cousin about the time her own grandmother got terribly sick from eating a root that looked almost exactly like this one, but had slightly different leaves. She carefully points out the distinction to the child. There are 3 veins in the safe leaf instead of 5. That tiny difference means the other plant would kill you, completely shutting down your breathing within hours. This is education, but it is nothing like sitting in a modern classroom. It is survival knowledge passed down through engaging stories, demonstrated with actual plants, and reinforced through years of daily observation. Your cousin will learn hundreds of these vital lessons. By the time she reaches your age, she will know perhaps 300 different plant species by sight, by season, and by location. She will know exactly which ones are edible, which ones are medicinal, and which ones will kill. She will know precisely when to harvest each one, how to prepare it, and what it is useful for. Modern botanists spend years in a university learning how to identify plants. Your ancestors learned it out of sheer necessity, starting in early childhood, because getting it wrong could mean instant death. The group moves on. You wade through a shallow stream, the cold water shocking against your bare legs. On the far bank, your aunt spots something that makes her smile. Mushrooms are growing on a fallen log. She approaches them carefully, examines them from multiple angles, and even smells them. Mushrooms are famously tricky. Some are highly nutritious and delicious. Others cause violent, painful illness. A select few will kill you outright. She picks 3 and leaves the rest behind. She is entirely certain about these ones, but caution is always wise. Hours pass in this beautiful rhythm of walking, observing, and collecting. The baby on your back has fallen fast asleep, lulled by the gentle, steady motion of your stride. Your baskets are getting heavier by the hour. You have gathered wild grapes, still slightly tart but perfectly edible. You have collected seeds from a wild grass that you will grind into flour back at the camp. You have harvested bark from a specific tree that, when boiled, makes a soothing tea that reduces fevers. Your aunt collects this last one very carefully, never taking so much that she damages the living tree. She learned long ago that you always have to think about next season, next year, and the generations coming after you. This is the essence of sustainable harvesting. Though your ancestors did not have a modern word for it, they simply knew that if you stripped a plant bare, it would not be there the next time you desperately needed it. The groups that learned this lesson survived. The ones that did not face catastrophic starvation when resources ran out. By early afternoon, you are miles away from camp. Your legs are tired. Your shoulders ache from the heavy weight of your baskets. But there is something almost meditative about this work. There is no rush and no pressure. There is just the steady, peaceful rhythm of walking and gathering, the warmth of the sun, and the beautiful sound of birds calling to each other in the canopy above. You are completely present in a way that modern humans rarely get to experience. Every single sense is fully engaged. You are listening for the soft rustle of hidden animals. You are watching for the shimmer of water that indicates a stream ahead. You are smelling the air for any trace of smoke that might mean another band is camping nearby. Your younger cousin suddenly asks a question. She has spotted a plant with bright red berries and wants to know if they are safe to eat. Your aunt does not just give a quick answer. She walks over, examines the plant thoroughly, and launches into another memorable story. She tells how her mother once found these exact berries during a harsh winter when other food was scarce. She explains how they sustained the band through 3 days of a brutal blizzard. She warns that you have to be careful because birds can eat them safely, but humans need to cook them first, otherwise they cause terrible stomach cramps. The knowledge transfer continues naturally. Every single plant is a lesson. Every single location is a vivid memory. This landscape is not just random territory to your people. It is a living library. Every tree, every stone, and every stream carries vital information that has been accumulated over generations. Your ancestors did not write anything down, but they were far from ignorant. They were deep repositories of sophisticated ecological knowledge that rivaled anything a modern scientist could compile. Finally, late in the afternoon, the group turns back toward the camp. Your baskets are full now, heavy with the food that will feed your entire band tonight. You have walked maybe 8 miles total. Your feet hurt. Your back aches. The baby has woken up and is fussing, wanting to be fed. But you are deeply satisfied. This is good work. This is important work. It is the exact kind of work that keeps everyone alive. When you get back to camp, there will be no grand fanfare. Nobody is going to celebrate your return the way they celebrate a successful, dramatic hunt. But everyone knows the daily reality. The hunters might come back entirely empty-handed tonight. In fact, they often do. But you brought food. You brought reliable, nutritious, life-sustaining food. And tomorrow, you will go out and gladly do it again. This is the rhythm that successfully sustained humanity for hundreds of thousands of years. It was not the dramatic moments, but the steady, patient, and knowledgeable work of gathering. Your ancestors were reading the landscape in ways we have almost completely forgotten. They were paying attention to nature with an intensity that most modern humans never experience. And they were doing it not as a hobby or a spiritual practice, but as the fundamental work of survival. Here is something that might surprise you. Your ancestor probably was not hunting today or yesterday, and maybe not even this week. We have this image of prehistoric life as a constant struggle. We picture early humans waking up each morning and immediately heading out to chase down mammoths or wrestle with saber-toothed cats. Hollywood absolutely loves this narrative. It is the classic story of man versus beast, featuring daily death matches for survival. But the reality was far more interesting and far more strategic. Hunting for early humans was not a daily grind. It was an occasional, high-stakes event that required immense planning and patience, and more often than not, it ended in total failure. A successful hunt might happen every few days if you were lucky, and every few weeks if you were not. The rest of the time, you were preparing, planning, tracking, and, most importantly, relying on gathering to fill your stomach. But when the hunt did happen, it was truly extraordinary. Let us say today is one of those rare days. The signs have been building up for a while. Yesterday, scouts spotted fresh tracks from a small herd of antelope moving through a valley about 5 miles from camp. The animals are heading toward a seasonal water source, following patterns your people have carefully observed for generations. The timing is right. The weather is clear. And most crucially, several experienced hunters are available and healthy enough to make the attempt. This is how it begins. It does not start with sudden impulse, but with careful deliberation. The group gathers in the early morning, consisting of 6 men and 2 women, all of whom are proven trackers and hunters. They discuss the plan using a combination of spoken language and precise hand signals that have been refined over thousands of years. They decide who will take which position, where the animals are likely to go, and what the fallback options are if things do not work out. They carry spears, each one a masterpiece of prehistoric engineering that took days to create. The wooden shaft was carefully straightened over fire and seasoned for months to prevent warping. The stone point was knapped from high-quality flint traded from a quarry 200 miles away. It is hafted with plant resin and sinew that has been processed and dried to create a bond stronger than most modern adhesives. Some of the hunters also carry odlotls, which are spear throwers that use leverage to triple the velocity and distance of a thrown spear. This technology is relatively new, may be only a few thousand years old in your region, but it is revolutionizing hunting in the same way the bow will revolutionize it thousands of years from now. The group moves out, and immediately you notice something. They are not rushing. There is no frantic chase and no dramatic sprint across the savannah. Instead, they are walking at a steady, sustainable pace, reading the landscape as they go. This is where hunting truly becomes a science. One of the trackers kneels beside a depression in the sandy soil. He studies it for several long moments, then signals quietly to the others. The track is fresh, probably left early from this morning. The depth and clarity tell him the animal was moving at a slow walk, completely unalarmed. The spacing between the tracks indicates it is a young adult, healthy and a good size, but not too large to bring down safely. He can tell all of this from a single hoof print. This is not magic. It is advanced pattern recognition honed over a lifetime of constant observation. Your people have been tracking animals since childhood, learning to read the landscape the way you might read a book. Every broken twig, every disturbed pebble, and every scratch on a rock face tells a vital part of the story. It tells where the animals went, how fast they were moving, how long ago they passed, and whether they were calm or alarmed. The group follows the trail for hours. There is no rushing, just steady walking, while periodically stopping to check signs and adjust their strategy. This is the part of hunting that never makes it into the dramatic retellings. It is the long, patient stalking that requires far more mental endurance than physical strength. Around midday, they finally spot the herd. There are 8 antelope grazing in a shallow valley near a water hole. Now comes the critical decision point. Do they attempt an ambush, trying to get close enough for short spear range? Or do they use the technique that humans, uniquely among all apex predators, have perfected? They choose persistence hunting. Here is what makes humans terrifying predators. We cannot outrun almost any animal in a short sprint. A healthy antelope can easily hit 50 miles per hour, while a human tops out around 15. But we have something no other animal has. We can run for hours in the heat of the day without overheating. Thanks to our nearly hairless bodies and an incredible capacity for sweating, we are built for distance. Most animals, covered in thick fur and lacking efficient cooling systems, have to stop and rest after intense exertion, or they will literally cook from the inside out. The hunters spread out and begin to jog toward the herd. It is not a sprint, just a steady, sustainable trot. The antelope spot them immediately and bolt. They are gone in seconds, quickly disappearing over a ridge. But the humans do not stop. They follow the tracks at that same steady pace, reading the signs and keeping up the pressure. An hour passes, then 2 hours. The sun is brutal now. It is the kind of intense heat that would drop most predators dead in their tracks. But the humans keep moving. Their bodies are designed for exactly this kind of extreme endurance. They are sweating profusely, yes, but that is the entire point. Each drop of moisture evaporating from their skin is carrying away heat that would otherwise build up and shut down their muscles. They find the herd again. The antelope run once more, but they are showing clear signs of stress now. Their tongues are hanging out, and they are panting heavily. They simply cannot cool down fast enough. The chase continues into hour 3, and then hour 4. The trackers are rotating the lead position, allowing individuals to drop back and recover slightly while others maintain the heavy pressure. This is cooperative hunting at its finest. No single human could ever do this alone. but a coordinated group communicating constantly and sharing the effort can accomplish what seems entirely impossible. Finally, after nearly 5 hours, they close in on a single antelope that has separated from the herd. The animal is stumbling now, its cooling system completely overwhelmed, and its muscles are beginning to fail from the combination of heat and exhaustion. One hunter moves in close enough for a clean spear throw. The weapon flies true, striking right behind the shoulder, and moments later, it is over. The hunters stand around the fallen animal, not cheering or celebrating just yet. First comes the practical, respectful work. One of them makes a quick, precise cut and offers a quiet prayer or acknowledgement. We cannot know the exact words or gestures they used, but evidence from multiple prehistoric sites suggests early humans performed some kind of ritual around successful kills. It showed respect for the animal that gave its life, and gratitude to whatever spirits or forces they believed governed the hunt. Then comes the butchering, which is itself a highly sophisticated, technical operation. These hunters know animal anatomy better than most modern surgeons know human anatomy. They understand every muscle group, every organ, and every single useful piece. They work quickly and efficiently. The hide comes off in one clean piece, which is incredibly valuable for clothing and shelter. The choicest cuts of meat are separated for immediate consumption and for carrying back to camp. Organs that spoil quickly are prepared for eating right on site. Absolutely nothing is wasted. Even the bones will eventually be cracked open for their rich marrow, which is one of the most nutrient-dense foods available. But here is the immediate problem. They are 5 miles from camp, and they have just produced several hundred pounds of heavy meat and materials. They cannot carry it all back in one single trip. And leaving the meat unattended means lions, hyenas, and vultures will claim it within hours. This is where the social dimension of hunting becomes absolutely crucial. 2 runners head back to camp at high speed to bring reinforcements. The rest stay behind with the kill, building a quick fire to keep scavengers at bay and beginning the process of smoking some of the meat for preservation. Within a few hours, more people arrive from the camp. Elders come along, as well as children who are old enough to help carry the load. Even nursing mothers arrive, having temporarily left their infants with relatives. Everyone participates in the harvest. The trip back to camp is a beautiful celebration. Successful hunts are rare enough that they serve as major social events. There will be feasting tonight, stories told around the fire, and probably dancing and music. The hunters will recount the entire chase in precise detail. And in the telling, it will become a permanent part of the community's collective memory. It becomes another vital story to teach young people about strategy, persistence, and cooperation. But let us be completely clear about something. This does not happen every day, or even every week. Between successful hunts, there are dozens of failed attempts. There are tracks that lead absolutely nowhere. There are animals that prove far too fast or too alert. There are sudden injuries that force the hunters to turn back empty-handed. There are hunts that simply do not work out, despite everyone doing everything exactly right. And this is crucial to understanding prehistoric life. Hunting was important, absolutely. It provided concentrated protein and fat that gathering alone simply could not match. The social bonds formed during these cooperative hunts helped cement group cohesion. The skills required, such as tracking, weapon crafting, and strategic planning, continually pushed the development of human intelligence and communication. But hunting was never the main source of daily calories for most prehistoric groups. That honor went entirely to gathering, which happened every single day, provided the vast majority of their nutrition, and did not require constantly risking life and limb. Hunting was the occasional glory, the high-stakes gamble that sometimes paid off spectacularly. What made early humans so successful was not that they were the absolute best hunters on Earth. It is that they were good enough at hunting while also being excellent at absolutely everything else. They excelled at gathering, tool-making, social cooperation, and adapting to new environments. They were ultimate generalists who could deploy highly specialist skills whenever they were needed most. And the hunt, when it succeeded, was just one single thread in the complex tapestry of prehistoric survival. Tomorrow, whether today's hunt succeeded or failed, there would still be roots to dig, nuts to gather, tools to repair, children to teach, and the endless, patient work of staying alive. They lived in a world that was beautiful, abundant, and occasionally willing to reward the clever, the persistent, and the cooperative. The antelope is gone now, successfully transformed into food, clothing, and vital tools. But the knowledge of how it was taken lives on. It is passed carefully from this generation to the next, refined and improved with each retelling until it becomes not just a survival strategy, but culture itself. By midday, the camp was alive with a sound that would have been instantly recognizable to any craftsperson throughout human history. The rhythmic tap, tap, tap of stone on stone echoed through the air. It was not loud or violent, just persistent and purposeful. It was the beautiful sound of someone making something that did not exist before. Your aunt was sitting comfortably on a flat rock near the central fire. She held a heavy hammerstone in one hand and a high-quality piece of flint in the other. Every few seconds, she would strike the flint at precisely the right angle, sending a small flake spinning off into the dust. All around her lay a scatter of rejected pieces and failed attempts. This was the exact archaeological debris that would still be visible 40,000 years later, telling stories to future people who had finally learned to read stone. This was not occasional work. This was daily maintenance, as essential as eating or sleeping, because tools simply did not last forever. That spear point you used yesterday might have chipped when it hit heavy bone. The stone scraper someone used to process the deer hide last week had a dull edge now, making it almost useless. In a world entirely without metal, without mass production, and without the ability to simply buy replacements, you made your own tools or you did not survive. But here is what is truly remarkable. Stone tool making, what archaeologists call flint knapping, was not something you could just figure out in a single afternoon. It was a complex skill that took years to fully master. It required an understanding of stone properties that bordered on intimate, expert knowledge. Different rocks fractured in entirely different ways. Flint was highly predictable. Obsidian was incredibly sharp but fragile. Chert was reliable but much harder to work. You had to know exactly where to find good stone, how to test it, and how to recognize real quality before you invested hours of hard work. If you watched your aunt working, you would see expertise that took a lifetime to acquire. She was not just hitting rocks together randomly. She was reading the stone, seeing lines of potential fracture that were completely invisible to untrained eyes. Each strike was meticulously calculated. Hit it too hard, and the entire piece would shatter. Hit it too soft, and nothing would happen at all. The angle had to be exact. The point of impact had to be precisely chosen. It was geometry and physics executed entirely through deep intuition and muscle memory. The process was called the prepared core technique, and it represented centuries of accumulated human knowledge. Your aunt had carefully shaped this piece of flint over the past hour. She removed precise flakes to create a core with just the right shape and angle. Now, she was finally ready for the ultimate payoff. With one perfect strike, a long, thin blade detached cleanly from the core. It was sharp enough to slice through thick hide or meat with minimal pressure. She examined it critically, running her thumb gently along the edge, and then she nodded. It was good enough, but she was not done yet. The blade still needed hafting, which meant attaching it to a handle that would make it actually useful. This was where basic craft truly became art. She had prepared a wooden handle earlier, using a piece of hardwood with a precise slot carved into one end. Now, she pulled out a small leather pouch containing raw pine resin she had collected and heated until it became sticky. It was mixed carefully with a bit of charcoal and crushed bone for added strength. This mixture would become the prehistoric equivalent of modern superglue. Watching her work, you would notice something fascinating. She did not even need to think about most of the steps. Her hands moved automatically through processes she had performed thousands of times before. She heated the resin over the fire, applied it to the handle slot, positioned the stone blade precisely, and wrapped the joint tightly with thin strips of animal sinew. The sinew would shrink and tighten perfectly as it dried. The entire process took maybe 10 minutes, but it drew on decades of personal experience and generations of accumulated knowledge. Near her, your brother was working on a completely different problem. He had a piece of antler from the deer killed 3 days ago, and he was slowly, patiently carving it into a spear point. This was very different from stonework. Antler was organic and flexible, capable of taking heavy impacts that would instantly shatter stone. But it was also much harder to shape, requiring entirely different tools and different techniques. He was using a stone burin, a chisel-like tool, to scrape and carve the tough antler. The work was tedious, producing a constant, soft scraping sound that formed a beautiful counterpoint to your aunt's rhythmic napping. Thin curls of antler fell away with each stroke, slowly accumulating in a small pile at his feet. Every so often, he would stop and test the point against his thumb, checking carefully for sharpness and balance. This point would be very different from the stone-tipped spears most hunters used. Lighter and more flexible, it could be thrown much farther and was far less likely to break on impact. But it took hours of painstaking work to make. An antler was only available when someone successfully hunted deer or similar animals. Stone was everywhere, but antler was precious. So, you used it carefully for special purposes. And you made sure everyone in the group knew exactly who had made what. Because here is something the archaeological record has only recently revealed to us. Prehistoric craftspeople took immense pride in their work. We know this because we find ancient tools that are far more beautiful than they strictly needed to be. We find stone points shaped with perfect symmetry, even though asymmetrical points would work just as well for killing game. We discover bone needles decorated with tiny, intricately carved patterns. We find antler spear throwers beautifully carved into the shapes of animals. Nobody decorates something purely functional unless they care deeply about aesthetics. They do it because they want their work to be recognizable and admired by their peers. Your brother's spear point would be highly efficient, yes, but it would also be undeniably beautiful. Because when you carried it, and when you used it to successfully feed your family, you wanted everyone to know who had made it. Status, reputation, and identity were all beautifully conveyed through personal craftsmanship. Across the camp, 3 women were working on an equally essential task: clothing production. One was scraping a deer hide stretched tightly across a sturdy wooden frame. She used a stone scraper to remove every single trace of fat and membrane from the inner surface. The sound was highly distinctive, a rhythmic, dull scraping that carried all across the camp. Her hands moved in steady, practiced strokes, overlapping each path slightly to ensure complete coverage. This was not quick work by any means. A single hide might require hours of intense scraping, and even then, you were not finished. The hide then had to be treated, either by smoking it over a fire or by rubbing it with a mixture of animal brain tissue and fat. This prevented the leather from becoming stiff and brittle when it dried. The brain tanning process was chemistry without labs, successfully developed through centuries of trial and error. Someone, somehow, had figured out that brains contained the exact chemical compounds needed to preserve leather. Perhaps they discovered it by pure accident, or maybe through systematic experimentation. Either way, the knowledge had been passed down carefully from parent to child for generations. Nearby, her sister was working on a hide that had already been successfully tanned. She held a bone awl, a pointed tool used for punching clean holes, and she was slowly, methodically creating a garment. She would punch a hole, thread sinew through it, and then punch another hole. The stitching was crude by modern standards, but it was remarkably effective. These clothes would be warm, durable, and highly flexible. They would last for multiple seasons, maybe even years, protecting their wearers from severe winter cold that could kill a human in hours. The third woman was doing something that would have seemed entirely impossible to earlier humans. She was sewing with an actual needle. It was a tiny piece of bone, drilled with a minute hole at one end and threaded with fine sinew. This technology was less than 20,000 years old in your time. It was a recent innovation that completely revolutionized clothing production. With needles, you could finally make clothes that actually fit the wearer. They could be tailored perfectly to individual bodies, and they could be decorated with sewn-on beads or dyed leather strips. She was making winter clothing for her young daughter. It was fur-lined and layered, designed to be warm enough for the brutal cold that would arrive in just a few months. The little girl sat nearby, watching intently and occasionally trying to help. This was exactly how knowledge was transferred, not through formal instruction, but through constant observation and imitation. By the time the girl reached the age of 10, she would be highly competent at basic hide work. By 20, she might be one of the most skilled leather workers in the entire group. But clothing and tools were not the only things being made in the camp. An older man sat by himself, working on something smaller and much more delicate. He had a collection of marine shells he had traded for last summer, when a neighboring group visited from the coast, which was a 3 weeks walk away. Now, he was drilling tiny, precise holes in them using a sharp stone drill. It was a painstaking process that required incredibly steady hands and infinite patience. These would eventually become beautiful beads, strung on plant fiber cord to make necklaces or bracelets. They were purely decorative and purely social. Nobody strictly needed jewelry to survive the wilderness. But humans had been making it for at least 100,000 years, and probably much longer. Because mere survival was never enough for us. We needed beauty, status markers, and ways to express our personal identity and group affiliation. Those beads clearly said, I have valuable connections to the coast, I have the free time to make beautiful things, and I value aesthetics. All of that rich meaning was conveyed through pierced shells on a string. What is striking about all this activity is the clear specialization of labor. Not everyone was good at every single thing. Your aunt had spent decades mastering stonework, and she was a genuine expert at it. Your brother excelled at antler and bone carving, but he was merely adequate at flint knapping. The woman making winter clothing was the single best leather worker in the group. And when her specialized skills were needed, others willingly contributed food or helped with her other tasks in exchange. This was not quite a modern market economy, but it was incredibly close. It was a clear recognition that different people possessed different talents, and that the entire group benefited when people specialized. It was also the very foundation for something that would become increasingly important over time: social complexity. In groups where everyone could do everything equally well, there was not much basis for hierarchy or status differentiation. But when individuals developed highly specialized skills that others desperately needed, the power dynamics naturally shifted. Suddenly, you had the best toolmaker, the best leather worker, and the best artist. They all gained a unique influence that transcended simple physical strength or hunting ability. And everywhere, the children watched. A boy of maybe 8 years old sat near your aunt, trying hard to replicate her precise movements with his own small stones. Most of his clumsy attempts failed, producing nothing useful at all, but she warmly encouraged him anyway. Occasionally, she would take his small hand, guide his strikes, and show him the exact right angle. This was education, prehistoric style. There were no schools and no formal curriculum. There was just constant observation and hands-on practice under the close guidance of true experts. By the time the boy reached 15, he might be highly competent at basic tool making. By 25, if he possessed real talent and dedication, he might be expert enough to teach others, allowing the knowledge to flow forward into another generation. Each new generation would add small refinements and tiny improvements. These would slowly accumulate over centuries, eventually leading to massive technological revolutions. The afternoon sun moved steadily across the sky, and the beautiful sounds of craft continued. The tapping, the scraping, the crackle of the fire, and the occasional conversation all blended together. They were creating the material culture that made human life possible, building the foundation for everything that would come after, one patient stroke at a time. If you imagine early humans as exhausted, half-starved figures trudging endlessly across a barren landscape, constantly hunting, constantly gathering, and constantly on the brink of total collapse, you are certainly not alone. That grim image has been thoroughly drilled into us for decades. Life before civilization, we are told, was nasty, brutish, and short. It is painted as a constant, unforgiving struggle for survival with absolutely no time for anything except hard work. But when anthropologists actually started living with modern hunter-gatherer societies and counting how they spent their time, a very different picture emerged. On average, adults in many foraging societies only spend about 4 to 6 hours a day on what we would call actual work. This includes finding food, preparing it, maintaining tools, and taking care of basic camp upkeep. The rest of the day is not filled with frantic scrambling at all. Instead, it is filled with doing nothing in particular. They spend it resting, talking, playing, making music, grooming each other, staring into the distance, and simply existing. If your day 40,000 years ago were plotted on a modern corporate time sheet, it would probably confuse a manager. Yes, there are definitive bursts of intense effort. You might track animals for hours, carry heavy loads of gathered food back to camp, or shape stone tools with careful, intense precision. But these active bursts are surrounded by long, luxurious stretches of low intensity, highly flexible time. This is time you can easily bend around your body's energy levels, the shifting weather, and the general mood of the group. So, what did people actually do with all those open hours? A lot of it would look surprisingly familiar, yet strangely slow to us. First, you rest. That might mean lying comfortably on your side under a patch of cool shade, half listening to the gentle chatter of your relatives. It might mean sitting near the fire, absently turning a smooth pebble in your fingers while watching the smoke drift upward in twisting ribbons. When the human body is your only real tool, preserving it is a vital part of survival. Resting is not laziness, it is essential maintenance. You also socialize. Conversation in a small band of 20 or 30 people is never just optional background noise. It is the literal web that holds the entire community together. Everyone talks about who saw which herd of animals, who found a new stand of rich tubers, or who argued with whom last night. These discussions are not just idle gossip. They serve as vital information sharing systems, conflict management strategies, and emotional first aid. You play with the children. You let them climb all over you like a living jungle gym. You show them how to throw little sticks at a target, or how to gently handle a sharp piece of stone without cutting themselves. Their games might look like complete chaos to an outsider. But through them, they are actively rehearsing adulthood, practicing coordination, testing social boundaries, and experimenting with risk and trust. For long stretches of the day, there is absolutely no urgent agenda, no tight schedule, and no loud alarm clock dragging you from one task to the next. The entire pace of life is dictated by the slow, natural cycles of the sun, the seasons, and the movements of animals, not by the minute hand on a dial. And then, somewhere in all that unscheduled time, something else wonderful begins to happen. Humans start to invent fun. Archaeologists have found numerous small objects at prehistoric sites that do not fit neatly into any category of tool or weapon. They discover tiny carved animals made of bone or antler. They find smoothly shaped pieces of stone drilled through the center, resembling early spinning tops. They uncover little figurines of people, sometimes exaggerated in strange, artistic ways. To a hungry adult crouching over a fire, these items might not do much practically. But to a child, they are true toys. You can easily picture it. A small hand tries to spin a stone disc on the packed earth. Two kids pretend to hunt with miniature spears made from simple twigs. A parent watches, half amused and half attentive, letting them help with a task that does not really need helping. Play is never a distraction from real life, it is real life. Through play, children naturally learn how to aim, how to negotiate, how to share, and how to both lead and follow. There are strong hints of games for adults, too. Certain small stones and bones have been found together in distinct patterns that highly suggest dice or counters. Archaeologists have found etched lines on flat rock surfaces that might have served as early game boards. These were places where pieces were moved back and forth in quiet, friendly competitions that passed the time and strengthened social bonds. We do not know the exact rules they used, or the stakes they played for, but the human impulse is clear. When immediate physical needs are met, human minds naturally look for patterns, challenges, and little puzzles to solve. Games are structured daydreams, and early humans seem to have had time for plenty of them. And then, of course, there is music. In ancient caves across Europe, archaeologists have discovered delicate flutes carved from bird bones and mammoth ivory. Some of these instruments are more than 40,000 years old. They are far from crude noisemakers. Some feature carefully spaced holes that produce completely recognizable musical scales. Someone sat down and deeply experimented, adjusting each hole just a tiny bit, learning by ear how to turn a raw piece of bone into a beautiful, working instrument. Imagine the very first time someone in your band brings one of those flutes out by the fire. The sky is dark, the stars are beginning to appear, and the embers are glowing warm. They lift the bone flute to their lips, take a deep breath, and a strange, clear sound rises high above the crackle of the fire and the soft murmur of voices. For a single moment, everyone freezes in place. Then, the notes repeat, hesitant at first, but quickly becoming more confident. Someone starts to clap a steady rhythm. Another person begins to tap a stick against a fallen log. Feet begin to move, and bodies start to sway. The camp, which just a few minutes ago was quietly settling in for the night, is suddenly alive with dance. Music and dance are far more than mere entertainment. They actively synchronize human bodies and minds. When everyone moves together, breathes together, and lets their voices rise and fall together, something powerful happens in the brain. Group identity strengthens, anxiety fades away, and the world feels, for a moment, coherent and safe. In small, vulnerable bands of early humans, those precious moments of shared rhythm may have been just as important for survival as any spear or shelter. After the dancing comes the other great technology of human leisure, stories. You are back sitting by the fire. The night is quiet now, and a few last sparks drift upward like tiny glowing insects. The older members of the group edge closer to the warmth of the flames. Children lean heavily against their parents, fighting off sleep. Someone, perhaps the best talker in the entire band, begins a story. It might be about the last great hunt, when the wind changed suddenly and nearly ruined the entire plan. It might be about the time the river flooded, forcing the group to move camp in a frantic hurry. It might be a myth about a trickster animal who steals fire, or a powerful spirit who lives in the thunderclouds to punish the greedy. Some of these stories are clearly based on real historical events. Others reach deep into the imaginative world of myth. But all of them carry something vital. They carry a warning, a clever strategy, or a memory of who did what, and exactly why it mattered. Without writing and without records, stories are the sole memory of the group. They carry crucial information across years and generations. They teach where the good water is hidden in a dry season. They explain which plants can cure a fever, and which ones will kill you. They remind everyone what happened the last time someone broke a strict social rule. Listening to these tales by firelight, half awake and half drifting, you are not just being entertained. You are being quietly and gently trained for the rest of your life. But not all of this free time is spent in conversation, music, or play. Some of it is devoted to the slow, meticulous work of grooming. If you have ever watched primates in a nature documentary, you have seen this behavior. Monkeys and apes carefully part each other's fur, picking out dirt and parasites, and inspecting skin with absolute concentration. It looks fussy, but it serves two crucial purposes: hygiene and deep social bonding. Early humans did the exact same thing, but with a slightly different twist. We had no fur, but we had plenty of hair. You sit comfortably with your back to a friend, a sibling, or a partner while they gently comb through your scalp with their fingers, or with a simple comb made from bone or wood. They pick at little bumps, remove bits of outdoor debris, and carefully clear away any unlucky lice. It is both highly practical and deeply soothing. It is the kind of intimate contact that says without words, "You matter, and I am paying attention to you." Then comes personal decoration. Red ochre, a naturally occurring, iron-rich pigment, shows up at human archaeological sites going back hundreds of thousands of years. It was often ground into a fine powder, mixed with animal fat or water, and carefully applied to the skin or hair. Was it used as a sunscreen, an insect repellent, or a symbolic body paint? The truth is, it might have been all three at once. You sit quietly while someone traces deliberate lines on your face, your chest, and your arms. Maybe they mark you clearly as a member of this particular band. Maybe they signal your specific role in an upcoming ritual, or your status as someone who has successfully completed a dangerous hunt. Hair is beautifully braided. Beards are carefully trimmed or decorated. Simple jewelry made from shells, teeth, or carved bone is threaded through hair or hung from cords around wrists and necks. These small acts take time. They are certainly not required to eat, drink, or stay alive. But they are a vital part of how early humans turned bare survival into a life filled with identity, beauty, and deep meaning. And in between all this talking, playing, decorating, and music making, there are long stretches of something that we have almost completely forgotten how to do in the modern world: just watching. You lie flat on your back and look at the clouds drifting lazily across the sky. You sit quietly and follow the slow path of a line of ants carrying food back to their nest. You stand at the very edge of camp and watch a herd of animals grazing in the distance. You observe the way they cluster and scatter, and notice how the wind shifts their scent. You trace the patterns of the stars, noticing how some constellations rise at particular times of the year, and how the moon regularly waxes and wanes. To a modern observer, this might look like pure boredom. But for early humans, this constant, gentle observing is exactly how they build a highly detailed mental map of the world. It trains the attention. It sharpens the intuition. The person who has spent hundreds of quiet evenings watching the sky might be the very first to notice an unusual pattern of clouds that hints at a severe approaching storm. The child who has spent endless hours following animal tracks just for fun might easily become the best tracker in the band without ever being formally taught. And there is something else here, something far less practical and much more mysterious. When you have no glowing screens, no written words, and no background music piped in from distant speakers, silence and stillness do not feel empty. They feel incredibly full. They feel full of the insect hum and bird calls, the sigh of the wind through the grass, the distant rush of water, and the soft breathing of the people you love nearby. In that deep stillness, the boundary between you and the natural world can feel much thinner. You are not a separate mind trapped in a frantic schedule, merely glancing at nature through a window on your rare day off. You are an animal in an environment, fully embedded in it, attentive to it, and shaped by it. So, the day of an early human 40,000 years ago is not a blur of endless toil. It is a beautiful pattern of effort and ease, of focused work and rambling leisure. It involves hunting, gathering, and crafting, yes, but also joking, singing, dancing, grooming, decorating, storytelling, cloud watching, and stargazing. Their lives were dangerous in ways ours usually are not. Illness, injury, and sudden hunger were always lurking nearby. But they also possessed something that has become incredibly rare in many modern lives. They had long, unbroken stretches of time in which nothing urgent had to be done. They had time to let the mind wander. They had time to be with others without any hidden agenda. They had time to simply be awake in a living world. And as the fire finally dies down and the last story fades into the warmth of the night, that spaciousness follows you into a deep sleep. Tomorrow there will be hard work again. But there will also be music, laughter, and the slow, quiet business of being human. So, let us zoom back in on that ordinary day 40,000 years ago. You are not alone out there on the savannah, in the forest, or along the icy riverbank. You live in a band, not a village, and not a city. It is a tiny human world of maybe 20, 30, or 40 people, and rarely more than 50. It is small enough that you know every single voice, every laugh, and every step in the dark. You can tell exactly who is walking behind you just by the way their foot scrapes the ground. You instantly recognize a cough in the middle of the night. This is not an accident. It is precisely how your species works. Bands that are too small cannot properly defend themselves, cannot share enough diverse skills, and cannot find enough marriage partners. Bands that grow too big become unstable, leading to too many personal conflicts, too many mouths to feed, and making it too hard to move together when the herds leave or the seasons change. So, natural selection, culture, and sheer practicality have all pushed your ancestors into a perfect kind of sweet spot. It is a living room-sized society that is intimate, flexible, and deeply personal. Everyone in that little group fits into a detailed mental map in your head. You know who is generous and who is lazy. You know who can be fully trusted to keep a secret. You know who will readily share food when the hunt goes badly. And you know who will quietly slip your child a piece of dried meat when you are not looking. These invisible maps of human relationships are every bit as important as stone tools or fire. They are exactly how your people survive. And wherever there are close relationships, there is bound to be conflict. It is not courtroom drama with kings and judges, but everyday frictions. Someone took more meat than they actually earned. Someone flirted openly with someone else's partner. Someone skipped their turn watching the fire. In a band this small, you cannot just walk away and never see them again. You are going to be sleeping 10 feet away from them tonight. So, how do you keep the peace without police, laws, or prisons? You use the oldest social tools human beings ever invented. You use gossip, mediation, and reputation. Gossip in your world is never just idle chatter. It is law enforcement, the nightly news, and social media all rolled into one. When two hunters argue over who wounded the antelope first, the whole camp notices. The story gets repeated around the fire that night, retold and subtly reshaped. By the time it has made the rounds, everyone knows who was selfish, who was generous, who apologized, and who held a bitter grudge. No one writes anything down, but absolutely nothing is forgotten. If someone hoards food, that mistake becomes a permanent story. People will remember when he hid that marrow bone. The next time there is a food shortage, people may be much slower to share with him. If someone is exceptionally brave in a dangerous hunt or kind to a sick elder, that becomes a story, too. These ongoing stories are your social credit score. They directly determine who gets help when they are in trouble. They decide who is trusted with important tasks. And they dictate who is allowed to sit in on serious group conversations. For bigger conflicts, you do not have a courthouse. Instead, you have the elders. You have the older woman who has seen 100 arguments about meat and marriage. You have the man who remembers the last time two brothers almost came to blows, and exactly how that was settled. They are not judges in the modern sense, but people naturally turn to them when tempers flare. They sit directly between the angry parties, speak slowly, and bring up past events. They add valuable context, reminding everyone of shared hardships and past kindnesses. Mediation is a vital survival strategy. A serious feud in a band of 30 can be an absolute death sentence. Split the group in half, and suddenly each side is too small to defend itself, too weak to move far, and too vulnerable to the next bad winter. So, the whole social system is quietly biased toward reconciliation. People tease instead of accusing directly. They complain in roundabout ways. They sing clever songs that hint at bad behavior rather than loudly naming names. It might sound indirect, but that soft social pressure is incredibly powerful. It lets people change their behavior without losing face. It allows them to safely step back from the edge. Underneath all of this, there lies a simple truth. Your survival completely depends on other people. That reality starts early, from the very moment you are born. In your band, children do not belong to just one isolated nuclear family in the modern sense. They belong to the camp, to the group, and to the entire network. Your mother matters and your father matters, but so do your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, your older siblings, and even unrelated adults who have been adopted into the family circle. In the language of modern anthropology, this is known as cooperative breeding. In the language of your ancestors, it is just life. Your mother might be off gathering roots, carrying your younger sibling, or helping process fresh meat. Meanwhile, someone else keeps you entertained. An aunt lets you gnaw on a bit of hide to soothe your teething. An older cousin shows you how to stack little stones. A grandmother hums a rhythmic pattern while she braids cord, and your young brain quietly absorbs the sounds of your language. It takes a village is not a metaphor here. It is a literal job description. If your mother dies, gets injured, or simply has to walk all day to track a migrating herd, you do not automatically die with her. There are other breasts to nurse from, other strong arms to carry you, and other minds deeply invested in your survival. That redundancy, having multiple adults caring for the same children, is an invisible safety net woven through early human life. It also frees people to specialize. Some adults are better at patient teaching, some excel at rough play that teaches balance and strength, and others are perfect at comforting you when you wake from a nightmare. The result is that by the time you are 10 or 12, you have learned from a whole village worth of teachers. Each one passes on tiny fragments of knowledge cribbed from their own parents and grandparents. Relationships and partnerships within this world are far more varied than simple one-man, one-woman arrangements forever. Different environments, different cultures, and different times probably saw vastly different patterns. In some groups, long-term pair bonds might have been the norm, with partners raising children together for many seasons. In others, partnerships may have been more fluid, with people forming and dissolving unions as circumstances changed. There could have been arrangements we would today call polygynous, with one man linked to multiple women. Or they could be polyandrous, with one woman at the center of multiple male alliances, especially in tough environments where resource sharing was critical. The key point is that there was no single, natural prehistoric marriage model. What remained entirely constant was the absolute need to manage jealousy, share resources, and protect children. Formal taboos, joking relationships, and unspoken rules all evolved to make this possible. They governed who could approach whom. They decided who owed whom meat or favors. And they dictated who could joke about what in public. These patterns act like quiet traffic lights, guiding everyone through the emotional maze of desire, loyalty, and responsibility. And a band of 30 is not the whole world. Beyond the circle of familiar faces around your fire, there are other bands and other groups. They speak similar languages or dialects, and are tied to you by distant cousinship, old alliances, or simple habit. You might only see them a few times a year, but those seasonal visits are some of the most important events in your life. Imagine late summer, or the end of the dry season, when resources are temporarily abundant in one particular valley. Herds gather, the fish are running, and the fruit trees are heavy with food. Herds gather, the fish are running, and the fruit trees are heavy with food. Word spreads quickly, not with phones or maps, but through long, interconnected chains of human meetings. A lone hunter passes another wandering band and mentions exactly where the game is thickest. A visiting cousin talks excitedly about a distant riverbed completely full of fish. Slowly, multiple bands begin to converge on a single location. This is your prehistoric version of a massive festival. At these vibrant seasonal gatherings, trade truly blossoms. A man from a coastal group brings beautiful shells and plenty of dried fish. Someone from the mountains brings precious obsidian for making ultra-sharp blades. Others have rich ochre for paint, fine animal skins, and intricately carved bone tools. Valuable objects travel hundreds of miles in small jumps, changing hands again and again. Each trade is sealed with warm conversation, stories, and maybe a shared meal. Mating happens here, too. If your band only consists of 30 people, you do not want everyone pairing up exclusively inside that tiny circle for generation after generation. Inbreeding is a silent killer of small populations. So, strategic alliances with other bands matter immensely. Young people meet potential romantic partners from the outside world. Some return to your band with a brand new mate. Some leave entirely, joining another group permanently. In modern scientific terms, this is basic population genetics. For your ancestors, it is just life beautifully moving forward. These gatherings are also where vital information spreads. Someone has discovered an entirely new way of attaching stone points more securely to a spear using plant resin. Someone has found a hidden valley where the harsh winter is a little less brutal. Someone has noticed a dangerous new apex predator moving into the area. Crucial stories, warnings, and innovative techniques ripple out through these networks like radio transmissions traveling across the continent. But they are carried entirely in human memories and words, instead of wires. All of this relies heavily on one extraordinary adaptation. Language, not just grunts and simple gestures, but layered, flexible, combinatorial speech. It is the ability to say not just lion and there, but 3 lions came from that ravine last dry season when the river was low, so do not camp there with small children. It is the ability to explain a complex hunting strategy, an ancient myth, or a vivid dream. By 40,000 years ago, your ancestors almost certainly possessed languages every bit as capable as any spoken today. They had different vocabularies and different rhythms, but the exact same basic cognitive machinery: syntax, tense, metaphor, jokes, insults, love songs, and lullabies. Language lets your band successfully coordinate incredibly complex hunts. It lets wise elders tell children about dangerous things they have never personally seen. It lets critical news of a severe drought in the next valley over reach you long before you run out of food. And at night, lying half asleep near the warm fire, language lets you drift away on waves of quiet storytelling. You hear tales of heroic animals, clever ancestors, dangerous spirits, and lost lovers. In this world, the elderly are never pushed aside. They are the literal hard drives of the community. In a physically demanding life, an old body can no longer do everything it once did. Knees ache, eyes blur, and hands shake a little when flint knapping stone. But the human mind, honed by decades of intense experience, becomes vastly more valuable with each passing year. The old men who can no longer chase a deer can still accurately remember which stars mark the exact change of the season. The grandmother who no longer gathers far from camp remembers precisely which plants cure stomach pain and which ones are deadly. The elder who has lived through a brutal winter can advise the group when it is time to move, even if the sky and ground look deceptively calm. When a small child's fever spikes, the elders recall past fevers and exactly what helped them break. When distant smoke on the horizon hints at a raging fire, they remember the last time the forest burned. They remember which animals fled in which direction, and which valleys stayed completely safe. They are walking libraries of famine and abundance, of massive floods and dry years, of intense conflicts and beautiful reconciliations. In a world entirely without books, losing an elder suddenly is like a modern library catching fire overnight. Which brings us directly to the reality of death. People frequently died young, often from sudden infection, injury, childbirth, accidents while hunting, or simply falling from a tree. But what is truly striking in the archaeological record is not just the cold fact of death. It is how deeply people responded to it. We find ancient graves, not just bodies dropped carelessly in holes, but highly careful arrangements. We find skeletons curled gently in fetal positions, sometimes heavily dusted with red ochre as if painted for a final journey. We discover individuals buried with their favorite tools, beads, pieces of meat, animal teeth, and ornaments. In some Neanderthal sites, bodies appear to have been laid to rest in pits that were then filled deliberately, perhaps even with wild flowers. This strongly suggests something much more than simple disposal. It hints at deep ritual. Perhaps your band believes the dead continue on in another special place. Maybe they become animals. Maybe they watch over the living from afar. Maybe there are stories about a shadow world hidden under the ground or above the clouds. Whatever the specific belief system, one thing seems absolutely clear. Death is never treated as if it were nothing. When someone dies in your camp, the ordinary rhythm of life completely breaks. Gathering trips are immediately postponed. Hunts are much quieter. People sit much closer together at night. Words are spoken far more softly around the hearth. Children ask curious questions. Adults tell fond stories about the dead person's bravery, generosity, or even their foolish mistakes. Death, too, becomes a permanent part of the gossip of the group, but in a completely different register. It is not about behavior to be judged, but about deeper meaning to be found. The profound act of burying the dead, of returning them to the earth with genuine care, does something powerful to the living. It knits them tightly together in shared grief, shared memory, shared fear, and shared hope. In that sense, social life and close community are not just pleasant add-ons to early human existence. They are the core technology that made everything else possible. Your ancestors did not survive because they were the strongest individual animals on the savannah. They survived because they were deeply embedded in networks of care, obligation, communication, and memory. Around that small, warm circle of 20 to 50 familiar faces, faces you know better than your own reflection, the entire human story is already fully unfolding. You see cooperation and conflict, love and jealousy, wisdom and foolishness, birth and sudden loss. It is a tiny, moving tribe carrying fire, tools, stories, and genes across the vast landscape. As the sun drifts lower and the day begins to cool, those tight bonds of community will completely shape the last hours of your prehistoric day. They dictate how you gather around the fire, what you sing together, what you choose to remember, and what you dare to dream about for tomorrow. By the time the hunting and gathering of the day were done, when bellies were mostly full and the fire had burned down to a steady orange glow, something else usually began. It was something that did not fill the stomach or sharpen a hunting spear, but it still felt absolutely necessary. Your ancestors had another vital job besides simply staying alive. They had to make sense of being alive. Picture the entrance of a dark cave as night falls completely. The very last light is fading fast outside. The air cools down, and the sounds of evening insects and distant animal calls begin to rise. Inside, the fire paints the stone walls with large, moving shadows. Someone picks up a smooth piece of red ochre. Someone else unrolls a long length of sinew with shell beads beautifully threaded onto it. In the half-darkness, people start to actively transform themselves and the world around them. To us looking back, it looks like art and religion. To them, it was probably just everyday life. Let us start with the most famous evidence of that rich inner world. Deep in the dark, far from the cave mouth, and far beyond where anyone ever needed to go to sleep or store food, there are paintings. These are not casual doodles made near the entrance, nor quick sketches you might make while waiting out the rain. Some of the most spectacular images in Ice Age Europe appear hundreds of meters underground, in deep places you cannot even reach without crawling or climbing. These are sacred spaces where no sunlight has ever reached. Horses, bison, lions, woolly rhinoceroses, and massive mammoths leap from the stone. Herds flow dynamically across the rock, as if the stone itself were fully alive. Carefully chosen natural curves in the cave wall become the bulging shoulder of a bison, the arch of an animal's ribs, or the swell of a running horse's chest. Some images are beautifully shaded and layered, as if the artist explicitly wanted them to move in the flickering torchlight. This was certainly not interior decoration. Absolutely nobody was living down there. To create these paintings, people had to gather torches, heavy fuel, pigments, and special tools. They had to carefully organize complex expeditions into absolute darkness. They had to know the cave layout well enough not to get lost and die. They chose these hidden places deliberately, then filled them with images that, as far as we know, only they would ever see. Why did they do it? The truth is, we do not know for sure. But there are excellent clues. One strong possibility is education. Imagine the veteran hunters of your group bringing adolescents into the deep cave, torches in hand, pointing at the painted herds while they tell stories. They show where to aim your spear, how a wounded animal behaves, and in which season the bison pass through which valley. The cave walls effectively become a kind of three-dimensional blackboard, a school hidden deep under the earth. Another powerful possibility is ritual. In many traditional societies, images of animals are never just pictures. They are active tools used to influence reality. They draw a successful hunt into being before it actually happens. They honor the spirit of the wild animals you depend on. They even apologize to them for taking their lives. Those beautifully painted bison may have been much more like visual prayers than paintings. Or, perhaps it was both. It was crucial teaching wrapped in rich myth, practical knowledge deeply encoded in sacred stories. It was a ritual hunt painted in the dark that perfectly prepared you for a real hunt in the dawn. And still the haunting question lingers, why so deep? Why risk the intense dangers of underground tunnels when a flat rock face outside would work just as well? Some archaeologists think those deep chambers were chosen exactly because they completely cut you off from ordinary life. Once you were down there, There was no day or night, no horizon, and no shifting weather. There was only stone, absolute darkness, fire, voices, and whatever moved inside your own mind. That is the perfect human recipe for altered states of consciousness. Which brings us directly to something we cannot fossilize, but can easily infer: early spirituality. Across many diverse hunter-gatherer cultures today, there are figures we would call shamans. These are people who dance, chant, fast, or use psychoactive plants to enter deep trance states. They travel to other realms, talk to ancestors, negotiate with animal spirits, and heal the sick. If something like that existed tens of thousands of years ago, and the archaeological evidence strongly suggests it did, it would make perfect sense to bring those intense ceremonies deep underground. They brought them right into the belly of the earth itself. In the dark caves of Europe, archaeologists have found strange clusters of dots, lines, and geometric signs sketched around the animals. These are not just realistic pictures, but abstract marks, ladders, zigzags, hand stencils, and series of dots that may line up perfectly with lunar cycles. Some researchers believe these marks formed an early notational system, a practical way of counting days, tracking seasons, and maybe even predicting migrations. Others think those shapes resemble patterns people see during deep visions, the geometric flashes of light that naturally appear behind closed eyes during a trance. If that is true, then the walls of these caves are not just records of wild animals, but records of experiences hidden inside the human mind. While all of this was happening deep underground, something else was occurring on the surface. People were actively decorating themselves. Long before the famous cave paintings of Europe, tens of thousands of years earlier, in fact, humans in Africa were grinding ochre, iron-rich minerals, into a fine powder. They mixed it with fat or water. They rubbed it onto their skin. They smeared it onto their tools. They used it to stain their animal hides. At sites over 100,000 years old, archaeologists have discovered pieces of ochre deliberately shaped and engraved, as well as marine shells pierced for threading. They have found little beads worn smooth in places where they rubbed against skin or clothing stained with pigment, creating necklaces, bracelets, and maybe even anklets that jingled when you walked or danced. Personal adornment might sound trivial compared to hunting massive mammoths, but it marks a profound shift in human history. When you start decorating your body, you are sending complex messages completely without words. Color, pattern, and jewelry tell the surrounding world exactly who you are and where you belong. They show whether you are married or single, a healer or a hunter, and a member of this specific group rather than that one. Those beads and pendants may have carried deep personal stories, too. A shell from the coast worn by someone who lived far inland signifies trade, travel, or the fond memory of a long journey. A tooth from a dangerous animal might serve as a proud trophy, a reminder that you faced intense fear and survived. Red ochre, in particular, shows up over and over again in ancient burials. We find bodies dusted with red, and graves entirely lined with the rich pigment. Perhaps it symbolized blood, life, or the setting sun. Maybe it was meant to protect the dead on a final journey, or to make them visible to the spirits. Whatever it meant, it undeniably meant something important. By the time you get to about 35,000 years ago, this symbolic world becomes incredibly crowded. Now, it is not just beads, paint, and animal images. People start carving the human form itself. They create the Venus figurines, small, often handheld sculptures carved from bone, ivory, or stone. They share a remarkably similar style across huge geographic distances, stretching all the way from France to Siberia. Many feature heavily exaggerated breasts, hips, and bellies. Faces are often minimal or completely absent. Arms and feet may be barely indicated at all. The primary focus is on bodies that look pregnant, fertile, and abundant. What exactly were they? Some think they were fertility charms held by women as a kind of hope for healthy children. Others suggest they were representations of a mother goddess, an early form of deity that embodied birth, nourishment, and the natural cycles of life and death. There is even a theory that some were artistic self-portraits carved by pregnant women looking down at their own changing bodies, seeing their belly, hips, and breasts, but not their face. We cannot be entirely sure, but whatever their true purpose, these figures show something crucial. People were starting to think about themselves as symbols. They realized not just that this is a woman, but that this small object stands for something much bigger. It stood for womanhood, motherhood, and life itself. And that symbolic thinking did not stop with human bodies and animals. It extended all the way to the night sky. There are hints, just hints, that some early humans were paying incredibly careful attention to the stars. At a few key sites, carved bones and stones show series of deliberate notches that may match the phases of the moon, or seasonal events like migrations and plant ripenings. Certain animal images in caves appear clustered in ways that some researchers argue line up with star patterns seen at particular times of the year. These interpretations remain highly controversial, but it wouldn't be surprising at all. If your survival completely depends on remembering when the herds move, when the salmon run, and when certain plants are edible, you watch the sky and you notice patterns. Eventually, you might start to believe the sky is a kind of giant story written just for you. And if the sky tells stories, then maybe the animals do, too. For hunter-gatherer peoples around the world, animals are rarely seen as just meat. They are persons of a completely different sort. They are teachers, tricksters, and guardians, the bear that walks on two legs, the raven who steals the sun, or the antelope that gave humans fire. These stories are never just entertainment. They are moral lessons, deep ecological knowledge, and maps of the landscape woven permanently into memory. Your Paleolithic ancestors almost certainly saw the world this way. When they painted a running horse on a cave wall, they may not have just been drawing a physical horse. They may have been invoking a powerful spirit that moves like a horse, thinks like a horse, and sees the world from a horse's height. To offend that spirit might mean bad hunting for years to come. To honor it might bring immense abundance. The result is a world where absolutely everything is alive with meaning. Rocks, rivers, trees, animals, clouds, and stars are all seen as living beings, all possessing their own stories and intentions. And in that world, special people would naturally emerge. They are the ones who dream vividly, who notice subtle patterns no one else sees, and who can calm a panicked child or soothe someone in pain with words and songs. These individuals might become the shamans, or whatever your ancestors called them. Imagine a night near the fire. The day's hard work is finally done. People sit in a loose, comfortable circle, some mending nets while others are half asleep. The shaman, the storyteller, the singer, the one who goes between worlds, begins. A drum starts to play. Maybe it is nothing more than stretched hide over a simple frame, or a hollow log struck with a sturdy stick. The beat begins slow and heart-like, then grows faster. Voices rise together. Feet start to tap. The group's breathing unconsciously synchronizes. After a while, you are not just listening to the rhythm anymore, you are completely inside it. Music is one of the absolute oldest human technologies we know of. We find bone flutes made from the wing bones of birds. We discover hollowed-out reindeer antlers that can be played like wind instruments. There were simple percussion instruments that would leave no trace in the archaeological record, but are almost certainly as old as language itself. In the flickering firelight, rhythm and melody do something extraordinary. They dissolve the boundaries between separate individuals. When everyone moves in time, sings the same phrase, and claps on the exact same beat, the group briefly becomes a single organism. Fear contracts, and time stretches out. People enter shared trance states, mild or deep, without needing any drugs at all, just breath, sound, and movement. In those moments, the stories about animal spirits, ancestors, and journeys to other realms are not just tales. They feel real because you are experiencing something that is, in fact, entirely real. It is a different mode of consciousness, a different way of being a mind in a body, surrounded by other minds and bodies doing the exact same thing. That is the profound social function of early spirituality. It is not only about explaining thunderstorms or what happens after you die. It is about welding small, fragile groups of humans into something strong enough to survive. Shared rituals, shared symbols, and shared songs are the invisible glue that holds the band together when food is scarce and danger is near. And when you put all of this together, the deep cave art, the beads and ochre, the carved figurines, the abstract marks, the music, and the trance, you get a picture of early humans that is very different from the caricature of brutish cavemen. By day, they tracked animals, knapped stone, dug roots, and watched the weather. By night, they stepped into an entirely different world. It was a world where the dead might listen, where the sky might speak, where animals had secret names, and mountains remembered. They carried heavy spears and sharp tools. But they also carried invisible things, myths, songs, rules, taboos, and dreams. And when the fire finally burned low and the last stories ended, when the ochre-stained hands were wiped clean on hides, when the drums went silent and people stretched out on beds of grass and skins, they fell asleep in a universe they had actively helped to create. It was a universe of deep meaning, layered beautifully over the raw facts of cold, hunger, and danger. While they slept, the painted herds waited in the dark tunnels underground. The beads rested quietly against sleeping skin. The Venus figurine lay beside someone's head, or remained buried in a pouch with other small treasures. Above them, the stars turned slowly, whether anyone was watching them or not. By morning, the practical work of survival would begin all over again. But that rich inner life, the songs, the symbols, and the sense of hidden forces moving through everything, never really stopped. It is still with us today. Only now, instead of torchlight on limestone, we use glowing screens in the dark. Instead of rubbing ochre on skin, we use digital avatars and fashion brands. Instead of carved ivory figurines, we have icons, logos, and characters that mean far more to us than their physical substance. The tools have changed, but the wiring underneath has not. As the night deepens in our Paleolithic camp, the very last embers glow red. Someone turns over peacefully in their sleep. A child murmurs and is instantly soothed. Outside, a distant wolf howls, and absolutely no one wakes. They have heard it 1,000 times before. Tomorrow will bring more walking, more gathering, and maybe another hunt. But for now, in the quiet between the crackling coals and the first light of dawn, the inner life of early humans rests. It has not vanished, it is just waiting to rise again with the sun and the stories. And as that new day begins, we can follow them into the next part of their routine. By late afternoon, the light is changing fast. Shadows start to stretch long, colors drain out of the landscape, and the temperature drops much faster than you would expect. For Paleolithic people, this is not just a pretty sunset. It is a signal, a quiet alarm clock telling everyone, whatever you still need to do, finish it now. The open landscape that felt manageable in the daylight becomes something very different in the dark. Depth perception completely collapses. Here is the final section of your script, fully formatted with sentence-by-sentence gaps. I have polished a few minor typos, like antelope to antelope, reeds to reeds, fat-rich to fat-rich, cuz to because, stray to streaked, and tabas to taboos, and enhance the vocabulary slightly to give it a cinematic, storytelling flow while completely preserving the story's motive. Predators that spent the hot day hiding in the shade start to move. So, your ancestors begin to contract their world, pulling it inward and drawing all activity toward the same single thing that has defined the evening for humans for at least hundreds of thousands of years. Fire. Not everybody had it all the time. There were probably still wandering groups that lost their fire occasionally, or went completely without it during rapid travel. But for many late Paleolithic communities, fire was as central to the evening as gravity is to your body right now. It is not just a tool. It is a literal boundary line drawn inside the wilderness. Us inside the circle of light and warmth, everything else outside it. As the sun sinks, people naturally drift back toward camp, toward that flickering center. Gatherers return with heavy armloads of firewood, bundles of edible plants, and maybe a few surprise finds like wild eggs, honey, or shellfish. Hunters straggle in later, sometimes triumphant with fresh meat, and sometimes empty-handed and silent. Children who have spent the day in a frantic swarm of games and experiments tighten their play radius, pulled in by the exact same invisible gravity. The entire noise level of the group shifts. Daytime work is all scraping, chopping, and calling out across long distances. Evening is far more contained. You hear the steady crackle of dry wood, the soft thud of someone hammering a last flake off a stone tool, and the muted murmur of voices as people settle comfortably into the glow. Before anyone truly rests, though, there is one more vital job that matters just as much as finding food. Building a safe place to sleep. Beds might sound like a modern luxury to us, but they were really a crucial survival technology. The bare ground is cold. It is damp. It is full of biting insects, parasites, and heat-sucking stone. Lie straight down on it night after night, and your physical body pays a heavy price. So, your ancestors learned to build protective barriers between themselves and the earth. Archaeologists have found distinct traces of ancient bedding, compressed layers of grasses, leaves, and aromatic, insect-repelling plants laid down in thick mats, sometimes renewed over and over in the exact same spot. Think of it as a brilliant, low-tech mattress. First, someone clears away the worst of the sharp stones and debris. Then, they lay down a thick base of dry material, grass, reeds, leaves, or anything that effectively traps air and sheds water. On top of that, they layer softer plants, or perhaps plush moss. Then, if they have them, they spread animal skins, hides from deer, antelope, or maybe even bigger game. They place it hair side up for insulation, and flesh side down for durability. It is not individually owned furniture. Sleeping spots strictly follow a highly detailed social map. Parents sleep near their young children. Elders are placed exactly where they are easiest to assist and protect throughout the night. People with tense or strained relationships are maybe not placed right next to each other. Over time, Everyone knows exactly where they belong when the darkness comes. These arrangements silently reveal status, alliances, and deep affections without anyone having to say a single word. And while all this quiet bed building is happening at the outer edge of camp, something much more dramatic is happening right at the center. The evening meal. If you imagine early humans constantly chewing all day long like grazing animals, the archaeological evidence does not really support that. For many groups, the largest and most reliable meal of the day seems to have clustered entirely around nightfall. During the daylight hours, people might snack out on the trail, a handful of berries here, a cracked bone for marrow there, or a few nuts and roasted tubers eaten on the go. But the full accounting of the day's success, especially when there was fresh meat involved, tended to happen in the evening around the communal fire. Food here is not just eaten, it is profoundly transformed. Meat gets roasted directly over the flames or boiled inside skin bags and bark containers. Bones are split open for fat-rich marrow. Perishable organs are cooked quickly before they can spoil. Fibrous plant foods are pounded, peeled, ground, or actively leached of bitter toxins. Someone tosses starchy roots directly into the hot ashes. Someone else turns skewers of meat over the coals. Another person keeps the fire at the perfect intensity, adding heavy logs at just the right time. This is not random chaos. It is a highly practiced choreography, and the distribution of that food is a vital social performance. Who gets the very first piece? Who gets the choice, best cuts of meat? Does the successful hunter get to keep most of the meat for himself? Or does it get divided strictly according to ancient custom, elders first, small children next, and then everyone else? Different groups probably handled this differently, but almost all of them would have understood one basic truth. You do not survive long in a foraging society if you are selfish at the big meal. So, the evening becomes a daily lesson in generosity and memory. People notice exactly who shares and who hoards. They remember who makes sure the child on the far side of the fire gets a piece of nourishing liver or fat, and who pretends not to see them. These choices sink incredibly deep into the group's consciousness. In a world with absolutely no written laws, these are the exact behaviors that shape your permanent reputation. They determine who will eagerly help you when it is your turn to be unlucky on the hunt. While hands are busy, mouths are busy, too. Firelight conversations are where human social life truly thickens. During the day, communication is often purely practical and shouted across long distances. Over here. Watch out. Try it this way. At night, the volume drops significantly. The content changes completely. People thoroughly debrief the events of the day. A hunter quietly explains how the antelope bolted faster than anyone expected. A gatherer laughs about the time they accidentally tipped over a whole basket of ripe berries. Someone gently brings up a minor conflict from earlier, a harsh word spoken, or a broken tool, and the group smooths it over while chewing. Because carrying that emotional tension into tomorrow could be physically dangerous for everyone. There is serious planning, too. They discuss when to move the camp, or who will scout that distant ridge tomorrow. They debate whether to follow the migrating reindeer herds north, or stay near the safety of the river a bit longer. These are not formal political councils, but distinct social patterns emerge. Some people naturally speak more, while others listen and nod, quietly influencing the flow with a single remark. Children absorb all of this by osmosis. They learn not just facts about animals and plants, but how decisions are made, what counts as persuasive, when to speak up, and when it is wiser to stay silent. And then, there are the stories. Once stomachs are full and the sharp, frantic edge of hunger is gone, the tone changes completely. Someone might start with a familiar tale about the time an ancestor killed a monstrous lion. Or when the river rose so high it carried away half the camp. These stories are never mere entertainment. They are information storage. In a world without writing, stories carry vital maps. They tell you which valley has the bitter-tasting roots that are safe to eat only if boiled twice. They tell you which rocky outcrop hides the best flint suitable for sharp blades. And they map out where the dangerous spirits, or in practical terms, sudden storms and flash floods, like to dwell. Wrapped around these dry facts are layers of myth, cosmic speculation, and outright invention. Did people embellish the details? Absolutely. But the exaggerations helped make that critical survival information unforgettable to the young. Under that same warm firelight, another listener might add a different kind of story, one that reaches upward instead of outward. Because right above them is the exact same sky you see now if you step far away from city lights. It is a sky so thick with stars that it looks almost crowded. It is streaked occasionally with the ghostly band of the Milky Way, and pierced by the sudden, bright scratch of a meteor. We cannot know the exact prehistoric moment a human first looked up and wondered, "What is that?" But it would be incredibly strange if no one ever did. Long before constellations had names we recognize today, people were probably tracing shapes in the air with their fingers. They were connecting stars into animals, ancestors, and ancient paths. Maybe they decided that a particular bright star was the watchful eye of a giant creature protecting them. Or that the Milky Way was the glowing path taken by human souls after death. Or that the changing phases of the moon marked the moods of a powerful being whose favor you desperately wanted to keep. None of this leaves physical fossils, but the human brain hasn't changed that much in 40,000 years. Give people unstructured time, a dark sky, and the deep need to explain a dangerous world, and they will invent stories. Those stories would directly shape future behavior. They dictated when to travel, when to plant in later eras, and when to attempt risky hunts. Slowly, night after night, a complex cosmic calendar might have formed in their minds. It was stitched together from light points that no one could ever touch, but everyone could clearly see. But while eyes are turned upward and thoughts wander far into the cosmos, the body is still firmly here, in a very real and highly risky place. Night in the Paleolithic world is never entirely safe. Beyond the ring of firelight, powerful predators are on the move. Hyenas, lions, leopards, and wolves roam the dark. In some regions, they easily smell the cooking meat, hear the human voices, and sense the heat of the hearth. Most nights, the fire itself and the concentrated human presence are enough of a deterrent. But not always. There are fossil sites where human bones bear the unmistakable, crushing damage of carnivore teeth. There are caves that show layered, alternating occupancy, humans living there one season, and big cats the next. So, someone always stays half awake. Vigilance becomes a rotating, sacred duty. Some people in the band may be natural light sleepers. Others take turns staying up, waking to toss more wood onto the coals, and listening intently for the wrong kind of rustle in the grass. The physical camp is explicitly arranged to slow down anything that approaches. The densest brush is cleared away from the center. Thorny branches are piled high at key access points. Sleeping spots are clustered so tightly that if one single person startles awake, others can be quietly roused in seconds. And in many late Paleolithic camps, There is another set of highly sensitive eyes and ears sharing this nightly watch. Dogs, or at least, the wild animals that would soon become dogs. By around 40,000 years ago, the profound process of domestication seems to be well underway in some places. These were wolves that were a little more tolerant of humans, a little less fearful, and a little more willing to hang around the edges of camp scavenging bones and scraps. Over generations, those slightly tamer wolves may have been tolerated in turn, and even actively encouraged. They are incredibly noisy when strangers approach. They smell apex predators long before you ever do. They follow faint tracks. They can help you hunt. And at night, they earn their place in the group again and again. Curled up at the edge of the firelight, or even pressed directly against human bodies on the bedding, they add immense warmth. Their thick fur acts as a living blanket, especially for small children. Their ears twitch alertly at faint sounds no human ears could ever notice. A low growl, a raised head, or a sudden, sharp bark. They are a biological early warning system, wired directly into your own nervous system. Once you begin to rely on that partnership, life without them starts to feel far too dangerous. So, you have this beautiful, layered watchfulness. The weary humans drifting deeply towards sleep. The half-awake adult quietly poking at the red embers. The not yet fully domesticated dogs shifting their weight and sniffing the cold wind. Together, they create a vital margin of safety in a world that never fully sleeps. Gradually, the evening conversations begin to thin out. The fire drops steadily from a bright flame to low, glowing coals. The harsh, vibrant oranges soften into deep, quiet reds. Someone adds one last heavy log, not for cooking now, but simply to keep the chill of the night at bay until morning. Tiny sparks rise gracefully and vanish into the absolute darkness, briefly imitating the brilliant stars above before going out forever. One by one, people find their familiar places on the thick bedding. Children wedge themselves securely between the adults, their small heads tucked against warm, protective shoulders. An elder pulls a soft animal hide up around their neck, hands folded gently under their cheek. A hunter, sore from the trail but deeply satisfied, stretches out on his side facing the fire, one arm draped loosely over the dog that has decided to sleep there tonight. The diverse sounds of the night settle into beautiful, distinct layers. Nearby, you hear the quiet crack and sigh of the dying fire, the soft, rhythmic breathing of the band, and the occasional murmur from someone caught in a passing dream. A little further off, there is the subtle rustle of small nocturnal animals in the brush, and the distant, haunting call of a nightbird. Farther still, the long, eerie whoop of hunting hyenas echoes, followed by the deep, chesty roar of a lion declaring its territory. To us, these distant threats sound terrifying, but to them, they are comforting and familiar, woven deeply into the background of every single childhood. People in the band learn to instantly distinguish true danger purely by sound. They know the exact difference between a hunting roar and a frustrated one, and between a curious rustle and an approaching charge. Underneath all of that activity, the great sky just keeps turning. The stars will slowly and silently toward the horizon. The moon climbs higher or sinks lower, depending entirely on its current phase. Clouds pass lazily by, sometimes covering the light, and sometimes revealing even more of the cosmos. Some members of your little band fall asleep almost instantly, sheer physical exhaustion winning over any lingering anxiety. Others linger for a while in that quiet, liminal space, neither fully awake nor fully gone. Their thoughts wander peacefully between the memories of the day and whatever half-formed images drift in from the fire and the stars. Maybe they silently replay a close call from the day's hunt. Maybe they think fondly of the child they lost to a brutal winter, imagining them dwelling among those distant, glowing lights. Or maybe they just listen to the steady, safe breathing of the people they love and feel, for a fleeting moment, something like pure gratitude. Eventually, even the very last watchers drift inward. The fire finally slumps into a flat bed of shimmering coals. The dogs settle their heavy heads on their paws. For a few brief hours, this tiny cluster of humans is as profoundly vulnerable as they will ever be. Their eyes are closed, their weapons are out of reach, and their minds are traveling in entirely other worlds. And yet, in another sense, they have never been safer than they are right now. They are wrapped in thick layers of protection that they have actively built themselves. They possess the generational knowledge of exactly where to camp and where not to. They have a carefully maintained, protective fire. They have built beds that successfully keep the cold ground at bay. They are surrounded by a loyal circle of kin who will instantly wake if a single person cries out in the dark. And they have the warning growl of an animal that chose, for reasons it doesn't fully understand, to live alongside them. This is what a day in the life ultimately leads to. It is not just about bare survival, and it is not just a constant, exhausting struggle. It is a nightly, sacred return to a shared center, to warmth, to story, and to the faint but persistent feeling that despite all the dangers, this small circle of light in the dark is enough. It is enough, at least until the morning comes again. So, after looking at all of this, what did early humans actually do all day? They worked, of course. They walked long miles to find roots and berries. They hauled heavy meat all the way back to camp. They painstakingly shaped stone until their hands ached. They mended tools, they fed hungry children, and they watched the fire. They kept a sharp eye out for teeth and claws glowing at the very edge of the dark. But that was certainly not all they did. They also just sat. They stared deeply into the flickering flames and did absolutely nothing at all. They watched clouds drift lazily over distant hills, and long lines of migrating animals pass along the far horizon. They told stories so slowly and beautifully that a single tale might last for several consecutive evenings. They played, not just the children, but the grown adults, too. They engaged in mock fights, held little contests, and played teasing games with pebbles, sticks, and bones. They sang together. They traced beautiful patterns on cave walls and on their own skin. They rested. Their lives were undeniably hard, but not at all in the way we modern people often imagine. It was not a non-stop, frantic scramble from dawn to dusk, but rather pulses of intense effort followed by long stretches of low, quiet time. It was a few hours of focused work, followed by a lot of simply being together, moving with the seasons, and moving with the natural light. That beautiful balance is the exact part we tend to forget. Because here we are today, with advanced machines that do our grinding and lifting, with artificial lights that turn night into day, and with more information in our pockets than any ancient hunter-gatherer could have ever imagined. And yet, somehow, many of us end up with far less true leisure than they enjoyed. We have less unstructured time, and fewer evenings where we simply sit and watch the world go by without constantly checking a clock. The irony is incredibly deep. We have built brilliant tools to free up our time, and then immediately filled that free time back up with endless noise. Your Paleolithic ancestors never scrolled through a feed. They never answered stressful emails by the firelight. When the sun went down, there were really only a few beautiful options available. You could talk, listen, make something, dream, or sleep. Their absolute attention belonged entirely to the people around them, to the flames right in front of them, and to the vast stars overhead. But if you strip away all of our modern technology, the basic things that mattered most back then still matter right now. Community matters, the tight circle of people who truly know your stories, who would readily share their last scrap of dried meat with you, and who would stand firmly beside you when the hyenas came too close. Today, that circle might be your family, your friends, or an online community. The physical shape has changed, but the deep human need has not. Our nervous systems are still completely calibrated for small groups gathered around a shared task, a shared meal, or a shared joke. Creativity matters. The very first carved bone pendant, the first handprint pressed onto stone, and the first rhythm tapped out on a hollow log, none of it actually helped catch more antelope. But it made life immeasurably richer. It successfully turned bear survival into a story worth telling. That powerful impulse to make something unnecessary and beautiful is still one of the most human things we do. Nature matters. For almost all of our evolutionary history, we woke and slept in perfect harmony with the light. We learned the cycles of the seasons completely by heart. We could read a wild landscape the exact way we now read digital text. Even if you live in the heart of a massive city, a primitive part of your brain still instantly quiets when you hear rain on a window, or wind in the trees, or waves hitting a shore. Those sounds are far older than language itself, they are older than Homo sapiens. And purpose matters. Early humans did not have complex 5-year career plans, but they had profound, immediate reasons to get up every morning. They got up to feed the children, to help the group, and to keep the fire alive for one more night. Deep meaning was seamlessly woven into daily, practical tasks. Our purposes may be far more abstract now, but underneath it all, the exact same question is always there. Who am I doing this for, and why? When we look back at their ancient days, at the walking, the watching, the talking, and the hard work broken up by laughter and silence, what we see is not a lost world we can never touch again. We see a template. We see a powerful reminder that a good human day has a very certain rhythm, effort and ease, noise and quiet, togetherness and a little peaceful solitude. As you lie here listening tonight, you are already doing something profoundly ancient. You are letting the day end. You are actively stepping away from the frantic hunt of emails and digital notifications, and walking back toward the fire. If you have enjoyed this slow, gentle journey into the deep past, you can tap the like button so the algorithm spirits know to show you more stories like this. You can leave a thoughtful comment below if you would like. Maybe tell us exactly where in the modern world you are listening from tonight, and describe which landscape is outside your own camp. Whether it is a desert, a forest, bright city lights, or crisp mountain air, it all becomes a beautiful part of this extended human circle. If you want to walk with us regularly through these quiet, hidden corners of history, you can subscribe so you never miss the next story. And if you feel moved to support this channel in a much deeper way, there is always the option to join us as a member right here on YouTube. That directly helps us make more of these long, gentle, immersive explorations. But please know it is completely optional. Simply watching, listening, and resting along with us is already more than enough. For right now, you do not need to do anything at all. Just imagine this. The fire in your ancestors' camp has burned down to deep, steady coals. Most of the group is already fast asleep, curled warmly under thick furs, their breath slow and perfectly even. Someone adds one last small piece of wood, more out of gentle habit than actual necessity. Above them, and right above you, the exact same moon drifts peacefully across the night sky. The exact same constellations look down, only slightly shifted by the vast passage of time, but still recognizably themselves. 40,000 years ago, a tired child blinked up at those exact stars, fighting off sleep for just one more story. Someone reached over, gently smoothed their hair, and promised them that the hunt could easily wait until morning. Tonight, you share that exact same, beautiful human need to stop, to be safe, and to let the mind completely loosen its grip on the day. The hunt can wait until morning. The world can wait until morning. For now, you can rest peacefully under the same ancient sky.